Did you know that out of the 12 disciples, only one died of natural causes? The rest? Well, let's just say their deaths were not for the faint-hearted. If you think following Jesus was all about peace, love, and singing hymns by the campfire, think again. These men didn't just preach the gospel. They paid for it with their lives, sometimes in the most brutal ways imaginable. Before we dive into the epic and sometimes painful ways these disciples met their end, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on more shocking, inspiring, and eye-opening biblical stories. Now let's get into it. Peter was bold, outspoken, and the kind of guy who would chop off someone's ear if things got heated. Literally, ask Malchus. But in the end, he requested to be crucified upside down because he felt unworthy to die like Jesus. Romans granted his wish. Talk about extreme humility. Peter spent years spreading the gospel, performing miracles, and strengthening the early church. He was imprisoned multiple times and survived several assassination attempts. But under Emperor Nero, his luck ran out. As persecution against Christians intensified, Peter was arrested and sentenced to death. According to tradition, when the time came for his execution, he told his executioners, "I am not worthy to be crucified like my Lord." So they flipped the cross, making his death even more excruciating. Imagine having nails driven into your hands and feet, then being hung upside down for hours. James was the first disciple to be martyred. King Herod Agrippa, I had him executed by the sword. Maybe Herod thought this would scare the other disciples into silence. Spoiler alert, it didn't. James was one of Jesus' closest disciples, part of the inner circle with Peter and John. He witnessed the transfiguration, saw Jesus raise the dead, and even asked for a front row seat in heaven. But instead of a throne, he got a sword to the neck. His execution, recorded in Acts 12, 1-2, pleased the Jewish leaders, leading to even more persecution. But here's the plot twist. The soldier assigned to guard him was so moved by his faith that he converted on the spot and was executed alongside him. Now that's a powerful testimony. John is the only disciple who died of old age. But don't think he had it easy. The Romans tried boiling him alive in oil. Yes, like fried chicken. But he miraculously survived and was exiled to Patmos, where he wrote the book of Revelation. Talk about a comeback. John spent his life preaching, writing, and strengthening the church. He authored the Gospel of John, 3 epistles, and the mind-blowing book of Revelation. He was a key leader in the early church, guiding believers while persecution raged on. His survival after the attempted execution stunned even the Romans, and they decided exile was the next best punishment. Imagine being alone on an island, surrounded by nothing but rocks and the sea, and yet God gave him one of the most powerful visions of all time. Andrew was crucified on an X-shaped cross, but instead of complaining, he preached for 2 days while hanging there. Now that's dedication. Imagine someone still giving a sermon while being executed. Andrew was built different. Andrew, the brother of Peter, traveled far to preach: Greece, Turkey, and even modern-day Russia. When he was arrested for converting too many people, the authorities thought crucifixion would silence him. Nope. He used his final hours to preach to everyone who passed by, urging them to follow Jesus. If social media had existed back then, Andrew would have gone viral for sure. Thomas went to India to preach, and let's just say, not everyone was thrilled. He was speared to death. Maybe people got tired of him saying, "Are you sure? Prove it." Too soon? Thomas gets a bad rap for doubting Jesus' resurrection, but he went on to do incredible things. He traveled to India, where he founded churches that still exist today. He performed miracles and converted many. But his boldness led to his death. Local priests, upset that their gods were losing followers, speared him to death. Talk about an extreme response. Bartholomew was flayed alive. Yes, his skin was peeled off before he was beheaded. That's next-level suffering. If you ever feel like you're having a bad day, just remember Bartholomew. He preached in Armenia and Persia, performing miracles and converting kings. But his influence made enemies. His execution was one of the most gruesome in history. It's said that he remained faithful even as his flesh was torn from his body. Now that's faith on another level. Paul started as a Christian hunter, But after meeting Jesus, he became one of the greatest missionaries of all time. He wrote most of the New Testament, survived shipwrecks, beatings, and stonings. In the end, he was beheaded in Rome under Emperor Nero. Even in death, he stayed true to his mission. Barnabas, known as an encourager, helped Paul in his ministry and spread the gospel far and wide. He was stoned to death in Cyprus for preaching about Jesus. But his legacy? Unshakable faith and a heart full of encouragement. Matthew, the former tax collector, left everything behind to follow Jesus. He preached in Ethiopia, Persia, and Parthia, bringing the gospel to distant lands. His death is debated. Some say he was stabbed to death in Ethiopia, while others believe he was burned alive. Either way, he stood firm in his faith to the very end. James, also called James the Less, was one of the more mysterious disciples. He preached in Jerusalem and was later thrown off the temple by religious leaders who didn't like his message. But guess what? He survived the fall, so they finished him off by beating him with a club. Brutal. Jude, also called Matthias, traveled far and wide sharing the gospel. He was martyred in Persia, either by arrows or being clubbed to death. Regardless of how he died, one thing is clear. He never backed down from his mission. Simon was part of a radical Jewish group before following Jesus. He later became a passionate missionary, spreading the faith across North Africa and Persia. He was either sawed in half or crucified, depending on different accounts. Either way, his end was not peaceful. If this story inspired you, hit that like button, subscribe, and share this video to spread the gospel. After all, these disciples gave everything. Sharing a video is the least we can do. See you in the next episode of Divine versus Unmasked.